This episode of Reasonably Spontaneous Conversation is brought to you in part by Clay Boykin Life and Business Coaching, because we all get stuck at times. For more information, visit clayboykin.com. By Janelli Bean, for fun and engaging children's books with cute and colorful characters. For more information, visit janellibean.com. And by Wise Owl Organizing, simply set up for you. Organizing consulting and clarity coaching, virtual or in person. For more information, visit wiseowlorganizing.com.
Hello, Clay. Welcome back to the United States, you world traveler, you.
It's great to be back, Dennis.
Here in late October of 2022, you were in London and you made a decision. You and Laurie were in London and you made a decision. I'm going to go to Turkey and visit some antiquities. What happened then? What was going on in your consciousness to do that?
Well, actually, it was Laurie that really encouraged me. I was ready to go home from our vacation. We'd had a great time in London, and then we spent some time with family in Majorca. And nearing the time to come home, Laurie said, "Look, we're already in Europe. Is there any place that you want to go?" And I said, "Well, I don't know, maybe Egypt to the museum there, but it really doesn't open until November. So let's just go home." She said, "No, wrong answer." I said, "Okay, Turkey." And before I knew it, she and Carrie had booked me a guest house in Old Town Istanbul. So, and they told me, "You're leaving here and you're coming back here."
So what was your experience there? Here you are, Texan and Westerner, and you're going into Turkey. You're going into a place where that gets close to many of the historical sites and many of the that are being unearthed in the world. And was that your impelling?
Since 2015, I've had on my mandala a place called Göbekli Tepe. It's the oldest megalithic archaeological dig to date in the world. And my intention years ago when I put it on there, I thought, well, someday I'll touch one of the columns. So when I thought about Turkey, I thought, in my wildest dreams, that's where I'm going to go do. And so that's what really pulled me into Turkey. And the way that I went there was just let it unfold. I'm not going to overplan this. I know the end point that I want to get to, but let's let this unfold and let's relax into this. I want to go and I want to see some sites, but I don't want to look at those sites like a general tourist would look at them. I want to look deeper into it. And I want to feel the energy of the space, get to know the people that are around there, the local people, and of course, people from all over the world. That was, like in Istanbul. So that was my intention in how I was going to show up in Istanbul.
And when I was reading your journal, because you allowed me to read the rough draft of your journal, you spent a lot of time, instead of just passing by a shop, you would sit down and you would talk to the people. What did you see the light in their eyes when they saw that this wasn't just your generic person who was coming by to put down their money and get? Tell me a little bit about that experience.
I sat the first morning drinking some wonderful Turkish coffee along this street in a little cafe, and I was watching tourists go by, and I saw the shop owners were kind of out there, say, "Hey, come look at my carpets," or whatever. And the tourists were just ignoring them. And that's not me. And it really brought to mind, I'm not going to show up that way. I'm going to acknowledge every one of those people. They're making a living, come on. And so I'm going to take just the opposite. Instead of shying away, I'm going to lean into it. And my intention was to make eye contact and greet everyone that greeted me. And it was so special.
You had some marvelous adventures in doing this, didn't you? Can you
I
share a
did.
couple of them?
Yeah. Well, what would happen would be, come look at my carpets my family, creates. And I would look them right in the eye and say, I love carpets. I've got carpets. I'm not in the market for carpets, but I got 5 minutes. Let's go. And they look at me and go, really? And I'd go in and I'd have tea. And I did that with everybody that I could possibly do it. One of the fellows, I said, I can't. I'm going back to the guest house. I'll come back tomorrow. And he said, right. That's what all the tourists say.
Sure.
And I said, no. I'll be back. I came back around the next afternoon and I said, I'm back. And his eyes lit up. He said, really? I got 10 minutes. Let's go. And 10 minutes turned into an hour and I don't know how many cups of tea. And I didn't buy anything. And he knew that because I already said it, but it gave him a chance to express and show. And I was interested.
Yes.
And I would like to believe that when I left that he was standing a little bit taller because I genuinely, I was, yes.
See, that's the thing. That's the exciting thing about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that energy would perhaps roll into the next person that I spoke with.
And it did. One of the things as I was reading your journal was how you were looking at your own, am I being taken? Am I wondering why am I coming across as the ugly American? So we have a lot of things that are going on inside our consciousness that we have to fight through in order to be present.
You're right. And how I just explained in showing up for me was, I think, the best way for me to get beyond that.
Beautiful.
And yeah, I have to share this. The first evening that I was out there, I stayed in the old section of Istanbul. And the first evening I'd been to dinner and happened to sit next to a family that was from England, from Manchester. And of course, we had a great animated conversation. But walking back, I realized I was kind of tired and full and a little bit disoriented. But I saw a baklava shop. Now, this shop, beautiful display, and there's several. I mean, they're all around, but this one stood out. And I went in and the shop owner, good looking young fella, and we talked and he gave me some baklava and I went to pay for it. And I pulled out a 50 euro bill instead of 50 Turkish lira. The difference is like this much. And I didn't realize it. And he caught it. He said, no, that's euro. I pull out another, no, that's euro. We did like 3 times before he got me to give him the right money, right currency. And deal was done. I bobbled off. I had my baklava for my evening snack and went to bed. I woke up the next morning thinking about this fella. And I said, he could have taken me and I would never have known it. I've got to go back and thank him. So I worked my way around, and that afternoon I circled back and I thanked him. I said, you remember me from last night? He says, oh, yeah. Come on in, let's have some tea. And we visited, and of course I thanked him. And he said, so where are you going? And I said, well, Göbekli Tepe. That's way out in East Turkey. You have to intend to go there. It's just not hop off in Istanbul and hit that. You got to intend on going there. And he said, really, how are you going to do it? And I said, I don't know. He said, well, I've got a friend who owns a travel agency. The little caution lights went off in the back of my head. Ding, 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 ding. But I said, no, this guy was honest with me. I can at least talk to the fella. And the fella came over and met us there in the baklava shop, and we visited for a little while. And I thought, this sounds okay. So I went over to his office, and about an hour later, he had a custom plan set up for me. Fly into here, take a night bus there, go on these little 10 or 12 person special tours, have a driver take you to a certain place, all the hotels. And I was mentally calculating this, going, oh man, this is going to cost me an arm and a leg. And he came back with a price. And I said, well, he said, how about this? And it was good. I put my card out on the table, paid for it, and walked out saying, I never really did vet this guy other than trusting. And I looked them up, and they're legit, And so yeah, it was trust.
Yeah. And did you get a sense, because we in the United States have a really strong, having a real strong nationalistic fervor here and a distrust of the other. And I hardly can think of a more other place than Istanbul. Going there in that sense of did that impact you?
It was in the back of my mind. I wasn't going to be foolish. Around the Grand Mosque, there were literally 1,000 people, all nationalities. And then there's fellows that are walking along. And of course, anytime somebody would look down at their phone, that would give them an opening. Oh, can I help you? Can I help you find something? And generally, they were wanting to help you get in front of the line or take you on this little walking tour or something. And every once in a while, I could feel in the tone of the voice that this doesn't feel right. So I would just walk along a little bit faster. But in general, I very quickly fell in love with the people.
How wonderful. So so now you get a chance to go on this sojourn to this amazing dig.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you what happened. After I visited the baklava shop, I went over the hill towards the Bosphorus, and I happened to cross an antique shop, and it wasn't a Chatsky. This was a real deal. And I walked in, and there's some beautiful things in there. And long story short, I struck up a conversation with the owner, a woman, and our artistic talents were very similar thinking in the meticulous way that we both do what we do. And she said, so what you going to do? I said, I'm going to go Göbekli Tepe. She said, oh, I've got a friend I want to introduce you to. And I said, well, okay. And she WhatsApped this fella and back and forth. And she said, well, essentially, he's the director of culture and tourism. So over the top. And I connected with him, and then when I got out there, we connected, and so much happened between here and there. But jumping to that, he met me at my hotel. This was the day I had visited Göbekli Tepe, and of course, I can't touch the columns. I mean, it's all roped off. Come on,
of course.
But that was still my intention. And I WhatsApped, I'm back to the hotel. I'm, if you're busy, don't worry about it. He said, oh no, I'm 15 minutes away. So he came over and we spent an hour together. And I showed him my mandala. I showed him Göbekli Tepe and Derinkuyu. I said, these have been on my mandala here forever. And so he started realizing I'm not the regular tourist. And he said, can you get a car? Yeah, I can get a car. I don't know how. He said, tomorrow you're going to, he made some phone calls right there. He said, tomorrow you're going to go here, here, and here. These sites, one is open, but nobody ever goes to it because it's so far out. And the other two, nobody knows about. It's not public. And by the way, these 3 sites are older than Göbekli Tepe. So I got the innkeeper and struck a deal with him, and we took off the next morning in his car. And And we went to all three of those sites. And I touched the column.
Could you sense when you were at these sites the people that were there? Could you sense what that life was like? What that sense was? What was that? Because again, you took copies of your mandala over there, and you so that this was an alchemical tour of sorts. Something was happening here that you were engaging this mandala in with an actual physicality of the place.
I was. And to your point about did I feel the presence of the ancient people and so forth, I did, enough to ask one of the archeologists who headed up one of the sites. I said, do you ever have well, first of all, is it exciting? She said, every day. Well, do you ever feel a presence? She said, well, of course. I said, do you ever talk to them? She says, yeah. And, if you can't feel the presence, you've got no business out here. And yeah, it was it was magic. I was left just speechless. And I said to her, I said, I'd give anything to come back and help. She said, well, stay in touch. We start digging again, and come volunteer.
So help me understand, when was this that you were seeing? When were these columns in our history, in our history, and who were these people?
We don't know who the people were first, and they date back 12,000 plus years ago.
Now, so this is pre-good. All right,
yeah,
this is
pre-dynastic times. And depending on which theory you believe on, with the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx and so forth, it's older than that. Okay.
Yes.
And to put this into kind of a macro perspective, the last ice age ended about 15,000 years ago. Okay. And so sometime these people, began to inhabit this area and create these I'm going to call them, well, I could call them temples, but these formations.
Right.
And what this woman said, and she showed me this photograph, she said, there are hundreds of these sites all over. We can tell by the aerial photographs. We haven't excavated them, but we can tell that they're there, and we can tell that they're similar, that they still have this basic column set up in a circle and it's kind of set down. And, the basic questions, who are they? How did they do this? And why did they do it? Because some of these columns are 50 tons. Yeah.
Yes. And so they had to get them in, and plus they had to do the architecture, they had to do the engineering, they had to do the mathematics in order to be able to do it. There's a lot of complexity here.
Yes. And the alignment with the equinox, the alignment with the stars. These just weren't plopped down. There was a lot of thought put into them.
It's an extraordinary. And so what did the archaeologists tell you about what they're learning about the people that were there? What do we know, and what do we, obviously there's so much we don't know, but what are they learning as they're going along?
The biggest thing is when we talk about civilization and its evolution, we talk about hunter-gatherers, and then we talk about farmers, and we talk about religion, and blah blah. Finding Göbekli Tepe and discovering Göbekli Tepe flipped it. They figured out that they went from hunter-gatherers to building temples to then farming, community and farming. It flipped it, because what happened was the hunter-gatherers had plenty of food. They could live off the land. There was no need for them to come together to survive, but there was something greater than all of them that brought them together.
Ah,
And that's where they
unimpelling.
built the,
That's so, oh,
yeah, yeah. And so that's what built the temples. And then around that then formed communities.
okay. And so that gives it a whole new, so there are, when you say that you want to go back and you're thinking, can you see yourself connecting back and going and spending some time at some of these digs?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, there was one of the sites where there was this carving of this man, and there were animals that were attacking him and stuff, and it was close to the ground. And first thing I did was I sat down beside it, you know, dusty all over and everything, but I just wanted to meld with it.
Mm.
And that's what I see myself doing. You know, I saw
But
guys.
seeing yourself, I mean, this is there. You see, there would be a big difference, Clay, between you and me going there because you are an actual sculptor. You have actually I've seen your work. I've seen the work that you've done in stone and the work that you've done in there. You actually you could actually relate to what these people did and that, and you could actually feel them working through their masonry and working through that as in a way that I could never do. I could be an ally, but I can't because I am not one. But you have. What was that like?
What immediately comes to mind is, yeah, the big column, but on a very small scale, this chisel mark. Look at this little chisel mark. Another human being did this. What was going on in his mind at that time, or her mind at that time? Why did it happen here? You know, what were they using? That's what really fascinates me, because there I can feel it. There I can really feel it. It's a sharp blow in, or it's a glancing blow, and that's where the feeling and the texture and the connection really connects for me.
Was it hard to leave at the end when it was time to leave the digs and that? Did you feel a sense of change in yourself?
The day was so fast and so long. When I walked off the last site, I felt totally spent, satiated. The endorphins in me were just, you know, busting out the top of my head. and the only thing I could think of is, I'll be back. I'll be back.
You took some stunning photographs that have been shown during this podcast, and that because it was it was breathtaking to see them.
I couldn't take enough. And there was one in particular at this one dig, and it had been found in this small community, and it was their last day of the season digging, and the surveyor was out, and they were digging over here, and they're picking up rocks here, and they were recording there. And so I started videotaping it, going across, going around. And in the background, the call for prayer was going on, blaring as loud as it could be. It gave me chills, you know, and I caught that on tape. And yeah, that was special.
So, how was the reintegration back into Western society from this experience?
I've never had jet lag like I had when I got back to Austin, because I really believe it was so much more than that.
Yes.
I had been on such an emotional high. And, you know, coming back from vacation, you know, you always have a little bit of a dip anyway. But I was so up there that the comeback to quote normal, whatever normal is, and then the, you know, 8 hours difference to Turkey to Austin, that combination really put me down. It took me, you know, they say it's supposed to take you a day for every hour time zone wise. It took me almost 2 weeks. And of course, I was pouring through my journal at that time. So my ability to land and get back to normal, I was still riding my trip because I was reliving it as I was writing and filling out my journal.
What a beautiful what a beautiful experience, Clay. I mean, this is the end. This is the bridge that we're having from the past to the present. That those people's lives were just as valuable and just as precious to them as ours are to us. And it's the same way that you were talking about when you were in Istanbul, and that while you say that you didn't buy anything, you did spend your time. That is non-fungible. You spent and you were present with them and allowed them to impact you and you to impact them.
Thank you for that. What just came to mind was how many times I'd been sitting with my journal open, my mandala out on my book, or just writing. A waiter would come up to the table and he'd just get bug-eyed. He'd look at what I was doing, and I just kind of leaf through it, and he'd grab one of his compadres and he'd come over there and I'd let them look at it. That happened so many times. There was an energy that they could sense. They couldn't understand it, but they could sense an energy, and it really drew them towards that. I tell you what, that was one of the biggest gifts that they gave me.
But when you say that they wouldn't understand it, it's because it's not rational. You're not dealing your mandala doesn't it comes across on it. It's a transrational experience. Certainly I can experience the beauty and the geometry and all, but when I experience your mandala and all of your mandala work, it's way beyond the rational. The rational is just one plane of understanding that I'm experiencing, and they got the same thing.
Yeah. It's what I've come to learn from the mandala are a couple of things. One is that the mandala, for me, is a field of infinite possibilities. And it's a place where my unconscious peeks through and becomes conscious. The other thing, and it did not hit me until I was on this trip, that my mandala, with all the pieces on it, is really a vision board. I mean, a blinding glimpse of the obvious. How many days, because just like Kenya, it was a place I thought I'd never see. Turkey, Göbekli Tepe, a place I thought I'd never see. And yet I wrote it down. And I wrote it down multiple times as I recreated the mandala. It was always written down, always written down. Every time that was written down, there was a subtle intention that was coming through. That was the unconscious that was coming through and expressing itself through my hand onto the page. And there I am. So it makes me wonder what else is on there that's drawing me to it.
And that is what we'll see as we continue to have these conversations, Clay, because there is a revelatory aspect to your life that reminds me that there are many things that I think I know for sure that I do not. And so be careful of arguing. There was a book that says, be careful, argue for your limitations, and you will own them. So I want to make sure, and you're helping me to understand, for me to look at what have I argued for and what can I let go of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And some people may say that this is, I don't know. But I really truly feel, and this is what I was reminded of through this trip, that how I show up in the world, how I show up in this infinite field of possibilities makes all the difference in the world. I could have gone there in fear. Oh, I'm in a foreign land. Or I could show up and it encouraged the best to come out in other people. None of this would have happened. none of it would have happened if I had not gone about it with trust.
Thank you, Clay Boykin. Thank you for being in my life from the first time that we met. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to learn from and with you as we go on these conversations, these open-hearted, open-minded pieces that we do together, creating something grander than we have. Thank you for taking this and putting your beautiful editing skills to it. I want everyone to know who sees this, it's because you edited it and put down these pieces into it. And I am so grateful for you and your presence in my life and your presence that you're making in all the difference in all of our lives.
Thanks, Dennis. I love you deeply, and I really, really, the opportunity to share about it gets me back up on this high again. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. And thank you, everyone who watched. And we will see all of you on Reasonably Spontaneous Conversation next time.
This episode of Reasonably Spontaneous Conversations has been brought to you in part by In Search of the New Compassionate Male. For more information, go to newcompassionatemale.com.